In Luke's Gospel account of the Last Supper, Jesus tells his friends that he has longed to share this Passover with them. I'm feeling much the same. I long to be back with my church family, sharing in the rituals that shape this holiest of weeks. I long to be with friends and family to share meals and tell stories and revel in each other's company. One of the rituals that I miss the most is that of the agape meal that my church family partakes of before our Maundy Thursday Eucharist. It's a community effort, and young and old alike cherish the time we spend together. I feel this year's loss of that tradition deeply. In the meantime, though, we can still honor Jesus' desire to share a meal with us. We can enjoy some bread and wine, some cheese or olives or fruit, and share with Jesus and with Christians throughout the world in an agape meal, a love feast that opens our hearts to see the world and its needs through Jesus' eyes. First, we thank God for feeding us with the gifts of the earth, and we remember those who are hungry. Throughout his ministry, Jesus fed people, and those of us who follow him are called to take seriously our responsibility to ensure that none of God's beloved children go hungry. Our principal act of worship, the time when we meet Jesus most deeply, comes from this meal that he shared with his friends. Honoring Christ present to us in the Eucharist means little if we cannot honor Christ present in our hungry neighbors. Next, we think about the fellowship that we experience when we share a meal together. The conversation and the laughter, the love and companionship, the time spent in pleasant company. We need these things as much as we need the nourishment of food. And so we are reminded of those who are lonely, who suffer from a lack of human contact, and who need to be listened to, affirmed, or noticed. Particularly during this time of social isolation, we need to look for those who need a phone call, a letter, or an email. Many are suffering with worries, doubts, and stress while we navigate our way through this time. And a kind word can do much to give people hope and comfort. When Jesus and his friends have finished their meal, they sing a song before they leave. I love the image that I have of this group who has been through a great deal together, joining their voices in prayer and praise, taking strength and comfort for what lies ahead. And so we remember that in praising God, we are united with the church throughout the world and throughout the ages. We may be physically separated now, but the love that we share binds us together for all time and enables us to be God's people in a world that desperately needs the message of hope that we can bring. Let us join our hearts and our voices in the Ubi Caritas, a traditional Maundy Thursday text. Since the love of Christ has joined us in one body, let us all rejoice and be glad now and always. And as we hear and love our Lord, the living God, so let us in sincerity love all people, where true charity and love dwell. God himself is there.
The Gospel of John tells us that on the night before the Passover, Jesus gathered with his disciples. They gathered for a special meal. And as they gathered, Jesus took off his outer robe and took a basin and a towel and knelt down to wash his disciples' feet. And his disciples were shocked. This was a job that was done by the lowest slave or servant in the household. Can you imagine the feet that Jesus was kneeling down to touch? Hard feet, calloused and worn and dirty and smelly, feet that had walked on stones and dirt, feet that had walked in the wilderness and in cities and in the country. These were feet, not pampered feet. This wasn't a pedicure salon. To wash the feet of guests at dinner was work. It wasn't work you would choose. But Jesus chose to do it. He chose this foot washing to be the act of love that he showed his disciples. And so he knelt down to wash their feet. And he washed the feet of Peter. Peter with his big personality. Peter who was always the first out of the boat. Sometimes he'd get it right. Sometimes he'd get it wrong. But he'd always be the first. And he was going to be the one that denied Jesus. And Jesus washed his feet. And he washed the feet of all the disciples that night, of Andrew and James and John and Thomas. Thomas who would not quite believe in a few days. And he also washed the feet of Judas. And Jesus knew that Judas would betray him. And yet Jesus knelt down and washed the dirt off Judas's feet. And then he said to his disciples, "Love one another as I have loved you. In fact, this is a commandment. This has the weight of the law. This commandment to wash each other's feet, to do this act of service." When we wash each other's feet on Maundy, Thursday, it is a sign of the service that Jesus calls us to. It is a sign of the love that Jesus calls us to have for each other. And it shouldn't stop with washing each other's feet. That's just the outward and visible sign of the grace of the community. And we are called to ask ourselves, whose feet are we called to wash? What actions of love are we called? What places that are dirty and calloused and hard and stinky, where do we need to be to act on the love that Jesus showed for us when he washed his disciples' feet?